If we go for 30 minutes, then we'll still be under an hour cumulatively.
That's true. This will probably be longer than 30 minutes. It's a little bit now, but we'll see. So.
Cool. Okay, so I confess, you know this already, obviously, but when I first saw the rioters on the 6th storming the Capitol, my first feeling, I've had this like pit in I was gonna say a pit in my stomach, and then I was like, does that really describe how you were feeling? And that's not really it. It was like this dark, sad sense of like disbelief and depression at what I was seeing, because I didn't see a group on an emotional level. I didn't see a group of unhappy citizens storming their government, which is a sight I would ordinarily be fine with. I saw a bunch of cultists, all sick with this deranged worship of a narcissistic con man, storming the Capitol at his behest. So it was, at first I was really, really disturbed by it. But I've definitely, I think, come around to seeing that while I don't like why they stormed the Capitol, I don't really have any problem with the fact that they did. And I think all the people who are wringing their hands about this, clutching their pearls, saying they attacked our democracy. I'm like, no, they fucking didn't. Like, we don't have a democracy. That government does not represent us. That government is not there to serve us. That government is there to serve Wall Street, to serve Raytheon and Boeing and Northrop Grumman. That government is there to lock up non-white people in inner cities for smoking plants and to bomb non-white people in foreign countries for living on top of fossilized plants. Like, it was interesting to see, not only in myself but in a lot of the people who responded to, who were commenting on what happened, them talking about there's like this religious reverence that they have for this imagery for the Capitol. I felt it in myself too. There was this feeling that on some level they were attacking our collective soul. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's fucked up. Like, no, that building has nothing to do with me on the spiritual level. That building doesn't represent me. The people inside of it don't give a damn about me. I didn't vote for any of them.
Yeah, I think I went through a similar range of emotions. You sent me the video of the people, like a live stream of them, like scaling some sort of scaffolding. It was a strange live feed that you sent me. Um, and I was a bit terrified because, you hear all these people say leading up to the election, oh, yeah, the right won't do this, conservatives won't riot, or they won't care who gets elected. They'll just go back to work and do what they've been doing, and well, that's not what happened. And um, clearly they have bit the Trump bug. They've, whatever Trump says, whether you, will get into the inciting violence part of it, but whether you believe that he was purposely inciting violence or not, he did. That is what happened. People showed up at the Capitol, broke into the Capitol, um, and it was a very, yeah, like I said, it was a very wide range of emotions, going from, I was a bit horrified when you sent me the live feed, uh, much like many people were, and then it sort of gradually turned into a an assessment, as I do, of kind of why are they doing this. And very similar to what you said, is I completely disagree with the reason why they were doing it, and the fact that, Trump had his lawsuit, he had his doubts about the legitimacy of the election. Those were confirmed to whatever level, in the eyes of the law, they were confirmed. So, like, You really have to get over that. So the fact that that was the reason that this whole thing was happening is disheartening to me. But the
By
fact
by by they were confirmed, you mean he failed? Like his suspicions were actually legally thrown out.
legally, yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. So, and if you still think that the election was stolen from him, you really just have to get over it at this point. I mean, him and all of the people who hardcore follow him, you have no choice but to get over it. I mean, you can't really do what they did at the Capitol, but they did. Um, and the thing is, it's funny because of kind of similar along the lines of what you said is like I didn't. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, the Capitol doesn't hold similar to what you said. It doesn't hold any sort of reverence to me. I was like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is it's a public building that I pay for every year with my taxes, and if you're going to um, if you're going to have a riot or insurrection surrounding somewhere, that seems like kind of the building to do it. And, like I'm not condoning it. Once again, not condoning it just for future people trying to cancel me. I'm not condoning any of the actions, but it seems like that may have not been the worst place to have your voice heard. Rather than burning down, I hate to make this analogy so early, but burning down buildings that are actually owned by fellow citizens seems like not the way to go. But just being at the Capitol building is sort of where I'm saying, like, protest outside. Technically, you're allowed into the Capitol building. By the way, it's a public building.
Oh, really?
So like, yeah. So that's kind of why I don't know how legitimate the news is surrounding this, but they seem to be sort of let in and
So that's true. I mean, it's not
mhm.
100% like
I've been in the Capitol building, you know.
oh wow. I have
So like it's yeah, I mean people go in and have tours and everything. So I mean, but
some of them were let in though for
yeah,
whatever that's worth.
yeah, we'll get it. I mean, we'll get to
Oh,
that.
okay. Yeah.
But um, but yeah, I would just be wary of saying like that because you're upset with the government, you should attack their building. You should by all means be protesting and angry outside the building because those congressmen and women will hear you. You know, they're inside the building. They're going to know that you're right outside in a display of displeasure. But attacking it to the extent that they did, I'm not sure how acceptable that is. But
I
maybe that's just
just
because I'm not sympathetic to the cause. I don't.
what I think is ridiculous is the government has been using the police as a standing army against its own citizenry, going back decades. Even totally nonviolent, peaceful, totally lawful protests have been met with uh, tear gas, mace, assault, mass arrest. Uh, the one of the more famous, in the grand scheme of things, relatively recent instances uh, was in Seattle in I think 1999 when there was the World Trade Organization protests because the World Trade members of the World Trade Organization were meeting in Seattle, and there were tens of thousands of protesters there, and the police actually incited riots. The police
Mhm.
turned the peaceful protest into this scene of violence, and there were hundreds of people indiscriminately arrested, even people who weren't even part of the protests, people who were just innocently observing what was happening. Um, I don't know. It drives me crazy that there's so much violence from the government towards its own people. There's so much violence done by the government to other people in other countries with the money that they pillage from us. And hang on, my dog. Hang on one second.
Very good.
Good girl.
Feel free to leave this in.
Maybe not the mic falling. I meant to mute it.
It's okay.
So maybe this is something to take out of the video. Maybe this is something not to post myself publicly saying, but I don't give a shit, honestly. Like that, I think there's so much evidence that the federal government is a criminal organization. Basically, I mean, at a certain point, it is an organization that perpetuates terror, both domestically and abroad. And I don't think it's unreasonable to. I hate the reason that the protesters did what they did, but when you have the government just flagrantly disregarding the rights of its people, with the Patriot Act, lying us into a war, and that motherfucker didn't get impeached over it, indefinitely detaining people, including U.S. citizens, without any due process, and submitting them to torture or subjecting them to torture. The NSA mass metadata surveillance, the CIA's own internal surveillance programs, the Obama drone strikes, which apparently can be used against American citizens, even minors, without any public oversight or due process. I don't think it's unreasonable to storm the Capitol, and I'm amazed that it hasn't happened sooner. I was talking to another friend about this, and getting sucked into that same comparison with left-wing protests over the summer versus the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. I support the why of the left-wing protests over the summer, and I support the how of this protest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have some food comments on that, and I'll try to tie them together. They might be a little disjointed, but I think the protests over the summer, BLM protests, if they had attempted the same strategy, they would have been met with very swift punishment.
They would have been gunned down.
I believe they would have. Yeah. And as much as I hate to say that, because it's not the same belief I've held my whole life, but I do think they would have shot people or something similar. It would have been more of a horror scene. It would have been like rubber bullets. It would have been smoke gas. It would have been a slightly different situation, more than slightly, a very different situation, most likely. So in that sense, I'm glad that they didn't do that, because I wouldn't want that for those people that were involved in the protest. Sort of, I agree with you in the sense that I think the line that I'm drawing and saying, like, maybe draw the line at attacking the building is because I'm not sympathetic to the cause that those people were there for. If it had been protesting the lack of help that people have been getting over the past 8 months, and I keep in mind we've been in a pandemic for very close to a year now. So I mean, we're really coming up on a year in March of shutdowns. If that was the protest, and protesting the lack of government response, and sprinkle in various atrocities of the government that you just mentioned, you mentioned a lot of, if that was the protest, I would be rooting it on. I might have even driven to Washington myself, because like that's what needs to happen. I mean, that, in an ideal world, that would be what people are doing. That would be how we would actually get something done, and how we could move forward in some of these ideas that we're preaching. And instead, it was about a president who's on his way out, who has already divided people in an extreme manner, No one in the rest of the government helps. They make it worse by impeaching him for a second time. I believe that happened today or yesterday. He got impeached for a second time. So, did he deserve it? Yes. Does it only serve in dividing people more? Yeah, also yes. So, um, it's just a lot to wrap your head around. But that's kind of how I feel about it. Is that I wish with all my being that it was for a different cause, because I don't think anyone was there to protest not getting $2,000 stimulus checks.
There probably would have been far fewer protesters if they had gotten stimulus checks, but maybe
that is
not.
true.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's what Jimmy Dore said. Whether or not he's right, I don't know. I mean, they do seem brainwashed into like this cult of Donald Trump. However, people are more susceptible to that sort of brainwashing when they're desperate.
for sure. Yeah, a lot of those people were probably not working. So I think it was the great, and I say that very sarcastically, Tommy Lahren, who said that people would just go back to work and wouldn't pay any mind to Joe Biden being president. And clearly they didn't. We just saw that. And I think a large reason why there were so many people there is because of, exactly that. A lot of these people aren't working because of, or they're not getting help. They're desperate, like you just said. So um, it is an interesting point. So